If I chip in, you can roll my way unless you want me to sit on the floor, but I think that's distracting.
Oh, I suspect there's going to be a great deal of Springsteen-derived interjection coming in. If you've been having a hard time all day, then I expect, there's going to be a few darts lobbed in. I know, I heard he was saying, so, I expect there'll be a few darts lobbed in there.
Has Springsteen ever written you a song?
1600, back at the world-famous Jammin Java with Renaissance Man. This is Peter Hammill. With Jerry, Steve, I'm still Bob. And while we have you here, it's been a long time since you've been in the States.
99 was the last time, yeah.
Well, you're long overdue. And it's
yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, I'm very. Whoa!
Looks like
I'm so pleased I'm back.
I'm assaulting us.
Yeah.
High quality.
Product placement. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this isn't going to happen.
And Peter Hammill assaulted himself.
Exactly.
On television. Yes.
True to type. In fact, quite typecast. Yes.
But shortly after that, I guess you had a real scare.
Yeah, I had a
I guess it was.
It was there was a bit of a gap in between. I mean, it was 2003, December 2003. Had a heart attack. Completely out of the blue. Apart from the fact that I was a smoker, so dumb. But I had no. I mean, obviously, I'm not. Don't have too much excess weight and what have you. But in the way of these things,
got enough for both of us.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. A lot of people have got that. But anyway, just one day, bam, out of the blue. It was, my cardiologist says if you're going to have a heart attack, it's the right one to have, if there isn't really a right one. But I didn't have to have any surgery in the end. But I had 3 or 4 days where I was in hospital and seriously wondering about it. So, yeah.
Quit smoking.
I quit smoking. I remember my last cigarette actually. Yeah, right before the. Well, the nurses were really good when I was in there in intensive care. No kind of no value judgments at all, because they got people coming in all the time. They got some of them go out alive, some of them don't, and their attitude was, look, if you want to carry on smoking, fine, be my guest, but be aware that will at least 100% increase your chances of having another heart attack within the next year, and if you have another one within the next year, it's going to be more serious. So, because I'm a bit of a kind of contrarian, bullheaded person, the fact that it was put to me like that, rather than you have got to stop now,
it was okay.
It just made sense, and also, I really used to like smoking. That was my trouble. I was a smoker. I probably still am a smoker, really. But at that point, seriously, it was what.
You're on the wagon now.
Yeah, I'm totally on the wagon. And I have to say, because I had this, really sincere reason to stop, I haven't actually wanted a cigarette since. And also, of course, I was enormously helped by, the first 4 days of actual physical withdrawal. I was flat on my back and I was pumped full of everything, and I couldn't smoke. So then it was just basically 2 weeks of the psychological stuff, and no, fine.
So did Holly and Beatrice also play a part in just making sure Dad towed the line? And
no, well, and particularly Phoebe, because I got a third one as well. It was actually always been even more down here, and she's been the one. She's now 20, going on 21, and she's always been the one of all of them who, when I was a smoker, would say, "You're so stupid! You are so stupid, Dad! It's so pathetic." Yeah, they had always been keen I would stop, but equally they kind of understood that it was. I mean, the problem is as well. It was very much part of my persona, because I was a roll-up smoker rather than a cigarette smoker. So that meant in turn that I had bits that I always had to carry around. I had to have my tin, I had to have my papers, I had to have my lighter. Anytime I was going to have a cigarette, there was the bit of business and the ritual. It's a ritual, exactly. It's a ritual, and it's a.
Sure. Some would say a fetishism, but
it is, and actually, and I think a lot of it is also a kind of time fetishism. It's not just the physical stuff. People who smoke are actually marking out the time of the day. Even if they're these people that they have. I have one after lunch, or I have one after dinner. But even the kind of the serious smoker going, all right, it's been an hour, I'll have another one now, and that's just kind of noting time passing through. Even though obviously I've got theories about it, but I seriously am not tempted anymore. This is from my memory of the the deal.
I understand.
Yeah, it's hard to quit. I've done it several times.
Ah, yeah.
Me too.
No, but then that means it's easy to quit, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oops, I'm moving again.
Sorry,
Deja
Will.
vu.
It's 1600. And welcome.
Will,
Step on in, Will. Say hello.
it is safe, but we are filming.
We're looking
so.
for the diamonds.
Yeah, so why don't you let me-
You'll need to sign the release.
You'll get union scale.
Yes, yes.
We'll be done shortly.
Now, your older girls, Holly and Beatrice, have sung with you on some of your records.
They have, yeah. Well, in fact, they were
I
all.
didn't know about Phoebe. See, that's
Well, Phoebe was also a singer. No, they all decided they all learned to play piano out of their own volition.
Really?
Yeah. No, they all, but they wanted to learn classical piano just because obviously there was piano in the house, so they're kind of keen on that, which I'm very happy about. And they all got to a level with piano where every so often they will sit down and learn a new piece or play an old piece, just for their own amusement, which is lovely. They all also then the school that they went to had very, very strong choirs.
Mm-hmm.
So they all sang in the choirs and they all studied singing, and they all got up to actually the very top level that you can reach in terms of English grade systems without actually going and studying music, which they were never interested in doing. They just wanted to do the grades. So all three of them did that.
That's great.
Yeah, and so and while they were around, I used those angelic voices briefly. Yeah, Phoebe has not managed to get on. In fact, my wife does castigate me about that. She says, it's not fair. I've got to get her voice there as well.
Well, you could do the bit like the Partridge Family, and get them all in there and playing drums or whatever.
Yeah.
As a multi-instrumentalist, how did you get started, and what got you into the other instruments?
Well, with guitar, I am completely self-taught. Some might question the value of the teaching still, but I am completely self-taught. On guitar, I began with I'm a Man and Smokestack Lightning, like however many zillion other people, because you can think you're playing those quite accurately for many, many years until you realise, oh no, I didn't have a clue. With piano, the two tunes that got me started there were Nut Rocker and the theme from Exodus. And
No kidding.
and I think it's not completely balmy. I mean, there is a certain linear descent that actually comes through from those two, and it was just kind of trying to pick things out with fingers and so on, and then basically almost as soon as I started doing those things, I actually started writing songs. I think I began writing songs in that the normal adolescent way where normally it's poetry, and
So this is the early 60s.
yeah, it's kind of 63, 64, something like that.
Who were your influences growing up?
Musically, again, I also was in choirs. I was a fairly decent treble singer, and my very first the first time I went kind of wow music, is I was at a junior school and went up to the senior school as one of the extra trebles to go and sing in the Hallelujah chorus. Now, of course, at that stage, I'd only sung in choirs where there were trebles and altos. Suddenly, to be in a choir loft where there were basses and tenors as well, and all the counterpoint, hey, I'm sorting myself even more.
Again.
Out of the past, was great, and I had the thrill of what music is at that moment, and just couldn't believe it. But of course, I stopped that classical thing the minute that my voice broke. So then, the thing that got me going was rhythm and blues, soul, British beat groups. The kind of the normal mix of that era for almost anybody interested in music in Britain. Granted, the fact that it was all still, it's like Dinosaur Land, what we're talking about here, where music was actually outside the loop, where actually to be interested in music and interested in records was not the norm.
Mainstream
it was,
thing.
It was the thing of, I found this music, this is mine. You like that, and also there wasn't although it was tribal, it wasn't tribal in an antagonistic way. It was, I like this, you like that. Well, that's okay, but I don't get on with it. But I like these things, and I'm fired by enthusiasm rather than antagonism for anything else. So yeah, those are the first things that got me going.
So what would it be? The Beatles, the Stones, or the Who?
Oh, the Who. Yeah, the Who, the Kinks, the Animals.
The
There you
Kinks. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, we always say the correct answer to that question is the Kinks.
Yes, quite so. Quite so.
There's a better writer than
Yeah.
Ray, man. He's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, no. And then Beatles. Out of those three, Beatles. But no, the Who were... Well, actually, the Who were... Again, there's that thing. I remember I got the My Generation album on the Brunswick label, which was only out for a week on the Brunswick label because, again, it was the 60s, lawsuits fly akimbo, the minute the record is released, somebody discovers, I appear to have a contract which doesn't allow you to do this. Happened to me as well, actually. Anyway, so I had that, and I think I'd heard maybe the very first single just on the radio, and then I went to check out the album, turned it over, looked at the songwriting credits on the back. Townsend, Brown, Townsend, and then I think and then there was an Entwistle, and there was one I think that was credited to all of them. But it was the first album that I'd seen where actually there was one writer, because the Beatles was always the two of them, even though we know it's not. Same with the Stones. It's the first time I saw something that was a bit like there's an auteur here, yeah. So yeah, they were big. And animals.
Have you ever met Pete?
Very, very briefly. I met him at a benefit somewhere. I think I'd just been booed off stage because I was doing one of my typical, it's not my audience, so I'll do something that's entirely inappropriate. That's really going to piss them off. And he was modestly sympathetic. Yeah.
Well, that's why we were wondering, listening to your influences versus what you guys put out, both you and with Van der Graaf.
Yeah.
And it seems so far removed. How did it get that way?
Well, some of the Van der Graaf stuff obviously is.
Yes.
I will come back to the question, but some of it, I think, for me, a couple of the songs on Nadier's Big Chance, so that is an absolutely clear line back to...
Who's up here somewhere a minute ago?
Yeah, he's assaulted. He sort of disappeared. Ah! Yeah, there we are. Clear line back to the early Who songs, and of course the early Who songs have a clear line back to everything that just has D, A, and G or what have you. That's the heritage that comes through, even though a lot of it has actually been filtered through kind of art students and university students in the UK. That's where it all comes from. So I do think there's some,
right,
yeah,
with that
and then there are even things like that occasionally kind of burst through in the middle of Van der Graaf stuff, but not normally as a complete song, as a reference within a song. So I think the reason it started turning out not strange from my point of view, because it's always seemed completely natural to me, the stuff. I'd begun from this basis, and then I started writing more and more things, and they started becoming a little bit stranger in terms of lyrical content and to a certain extent musical content. But I didn't realise this. Then I went to university for a brief period and met up with Judge Smith, who eventually went off with me, and finally formed the band with really good musicians, where there was almost a responsibility to write something that was more challenging. So that was point one. And the other thing is that these really good musicians came with interests and backgrounds in classical music, in jazz of various kinds, and obviously the common soul and blues heritage, which I've mentioned. And particularly at that time, particularly at this sort of cusp of 68, 69, it seemed that it was the bright new world. It seemed that anything was going to be possible. Yeah, it did seem that anything was going to be possible, without it actually being some kind of strange academic or go faster virtuoso thing. It's just that it seemed possible and indeed natural to stick together Stockhausen and Ligeti and Hendrix and James Brown and Bach and to do all of that, and simultaneously to be, because obviously sci-fi was particularly big at the time, to write about kind of the sort of sci-fi subjects that became neo-philosophical and what have you. And so just this was the mix that was around at the time. And I was, kind of an impressionable kind of 19, 20, 21-year-old, and that was the stuff that interested me and excited me, and so it actually just seemed incredibly natural. And it was incredibly natural at that time. And also, of course, all the bands that were around then, although it seems, I think, in retrospect, to be a whole culture that would be working together, we didn't really see that much of each other because we were in broken down transits going up and down the M1 all the time, and so actually the times when we did meet up together would be in Soho drinking clubs kind of late at night, and we'd be far too gone to actually have a society in any case. So basically each band was kind of operating within its own bubble as well.
But you played, on and off with different people, that were your contemporaries, your peers, Peter Gabriel, Robert Fripp.
Yep.
And Vandergraaf started out the same time that Genesis and King Crimson and maybe
Yes.
Hawkwind.
Well, I was
Slightly-
going to say Pink Floyd and maybe
Pink Floyd, well, the
around.
chronology of this, the thing is, the chronology of this is Pink Floyd were before. We were kind of more or less simultaneous with us. Genesis was slightly afterwards, and actually in this historical thing, actually in terms of weeks, things would be changing. I remember the night that Yes kind of got their first break when somebody had cancelled at the Speakeasy, and they rushed and played at the Speakeasy, and eventually they got a manager out of that who was not entirely good news, I think, in the end. But I don't want to get into anything which might involve legal.
deal with some of that later.
But yeah, all these people were starting more or less at the same time. But as I say, with very different kind of previous experiences.
But the music was all this, just incredible amalgam of, jazz and classical and rock and R&B.
Yeah.
And everybody sort of had a different voice, very distinctive. And I think Vandergraaf really was one of the first bands to be doing what would become fusion. And kind of out there, kind of on the outer edge, the really experimental edge, I think.
Yeah, but I think the thing that characterises more than the kind of fusion angle of things would be the taking stuff from Ligeti, Stockhausen, Messiaen particularly, taking the modern classical stuff. A lot of people were taking the romantic composers and going big arpeggios and all of that stuff, but that wasn't really our style.
No,
again because we kind of like being scary as well. We like scaring ourselves, and therefore we like scaring other people.
There's always
and
a real
out of this, I think that Crimson and us were the scary bands.
Yeah.
Not only for us, not only for the audiences, but for
yourselves.
other bands as well at the time. And I think the point about this is that we started, as did Crimson, kind of slightly preceded us, and we were underground bands at first, rather than when we first came out, we were known as underground bands, which also encompassed, as you say, Pink Floyd, Crazy World of Arthur Brown, Dan Tallion's Chariot, who's
Andy Summers. Yeah.
Zoot Money and Andy Summers, very good group. Family. And that was a
John Wetton came.
Gong.
Gong were French, and the French have always been somewhere
A
else,
little different,
somewhere else entirely.
Yes, the French are.
So, but you see, so that little group, if I just take that as a grouping, that's really diverse, and actually quite scary as well, And then actually it came up to the 70s, began to be the progressive thing, and that was, as I say, a little bit more florid, a little bit more successful as well, to tell the honest truth. That's when things started getting stadiums, lots of keyboards, all of that stuff.
12-piece ensemble.
Keith Emerson played Nut Rocker then, right?
He possibly did, because also, actually, I did, and you're quite right, thanks for that, because the Nice were also one of the underground bands, and the Nice were an absolute knockout band. Now, Keith is and remains a good player, but, for me, the best band was the Nice, and particularly the Nice when Davey O'List was in it, was absolutely, totally unpredictable, firecracker band. But yeah, so I think I covered that question, whatever it was.
You know what?
Period.
Before this falls, I don't want that you don't need a concussion.
Well, that one was up there.
Okay, well, fine.
Well,
I just didn't want it to fall.
we won't take any chances.
Taking care of that gas.
Now, you mentioned Arthur Brown.
Yeah.
Was he somebody that you
He was big
collaborated with?
Never actually collaborated with him except at a late stage on Judd Smith, who was the guy I formed the band with at Manchester University. We were really big fans of Arthur Brown. And Arthur Brown band was absolutely fantastic as well. And again, oddly, was a three-piece with organ, drums, and Arthur singing. So was kind of quite prophetic. So yeah, we were big fans of his, and kind of knew him vaguely.
There was the Crazy World of Arthur Brown.
Crazy World of Arthur Brown, Vincent Crane, and
Kingdom
Drakenseeker. Kingdom Come also grew. Kingdom Come actually supported me on an Italian tour once. And then later, Judge Smith had a song story about an airship disaster, which I sang.
Oh yeah.
I sang the villain on. You know, it's his revenge on me. He gave me the part of the real bastard. And Arthur also sang on that. So, yeah.
Did you ever get on any of those big festivals like the Isle of Wight?
Not the Isle of Wight. No, we did Wheelie. They were kind of the start of the festival. I hated festivals. I mean, and
Oh, they're not that easy to be in the audience.
Yeah, I know. Well, what really did for me about festivals, the big one used to be Reading. I mean, it wasn't
right.
big. It was I suppose kind of 10, 20,000 people, something like that. But that was the one. And I, among the many times at which I've got sincerely worried about this industry, is we did Reading one year and kind of, in order to get to the backstage, it was the usual sea of mud, and in those days, kind of one toilet per 10,000 people, you know, and just So we waded our way through the sea of mud and got backstage, and I found, not only was there a bar, not only was there a restaurant, there's hairdressers backstage, and I thought this world is going completely mad. So yeah, and that partly is why I don't like them. It's a you don't get the time to focus. You're on in a minute. Inevitably there's a bit of you have to do the populist tunes.
The sun's in your eyes.
Because of course it's the sun. You're not on in the darkness. You are on inside. You're probably on actually at noon. We had some fun at a couple of festivals, but it's not my favourite place to
hard to set an atmosphere.
Yeah, exactly.
And you really kind of need that to have that back and forth.
Yeah, and you're trying to browbeat people, really. You're trying on the one hand, and I'm sure this is the same actually for people who are very successful festival acts. They have their fans who are there for them, but obviously not everybody is going to be their fans. So they've got to browbeat the ones who aren't, which might alienate the ones who are, who would presumably want something a little bit different. I would say, in terms of obviously I'm a near 6-year-old bloke, so I'm not don't have my finger on the beating pulse of rock music, but I do think
there's not really. It's
not that kind of show. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But I do think in terms of that working that festival stuff, I think Radiohead have done a good job of actually presenting interesting stuff in that environment, which I think is incredibly hard.
Just never in DC.
Never in DC.
It always rains.
It always rains
rains
so
when they play.
badly. So badly. They got flooded out one year, and we got flooded out this year, even though we saw
Their
the show.
stage sunk in the ground.
Yeah, and the other show.
Some people would say that's an effect, wouldn't it? We
must have paid a
spent
good
thousands
deal for
on
it.
that.
Yeah.
The research for that, can you believe?
Yeah, one year somebody even got hit by lightning. So, they just don't have good luck around here.
Yeah, okay. traditional state of affairs. A traditional feeling of moving just to prove that we're there. Setting targets in the car. I've been thinking about it. Not so far to drive. Setting targets in the car. I've been thinking it's over it. Not so far, not so far, not so far to drive.
I just realised the target I've set myself in this set. I think that's the last song about cars. And I do have to point out that you know, I've only been back here a day. The American version of Drive, where it's a lot of slow cruising and then suddenly a good manic action, is very different to the European mode where it's always manic action. Especially in Italy.